Brady Corbet, our filmmaker, has done something that you could say is fearless, but is not done without fear and suffering and sacrifice. It's a 7-year ongoing journey that he and Mona Fastfold, his wife and creative partner, have toiled over.
My partner and I, who's also my wife, Mona Fastfold, we had discussed doing a post-war film for a while, and we had also contemplated doing a film on architecture. There's surprisingly few seminal films on the subject. Brutalism, which was a style that came about in the 1950s, was the best visual allegory for dealing with or exploring post-war trauma.
Brady came to me and said that he wanted to tell a story of an architect and his relationship to an investor.
What is this? Who are you?
Laszlo Toth.
That was the very beginning of the project. And then we were both quite interested in brutalism.
We drew inspiration from our personal lives, from our professional lives. We drew inspiration from our family members. We each have architects in the family. My mother's brother studied at Taliesin West, Frank Lloyd Wright School in Arizona. Mona's grandfather was also a mid-century designer in Norway. Everything we've ever made, they're personal, probably in ways that people could not, really anticipate or expect. But this one, we put a lot of ourselves into.
Several years ago now, we wrapped on Vox Lux, and we were in a parking lot in upstate New York, and he swung round with a book on brutalist architecture and said, "This is the next one." And
Have you seen that?
a rarity for a director to do that.
Looks good.
Damn right it does.
The film chronicles roughly 35 years in the life of a character called Laszlo Toth, who has survived the camps in Europe and emigrates from Bremerhaven to Philadelphia in 1947.
I mean, Laszlo is a Jewish-Hungarian architect who survives the Holocaust and, like many Europeans seeking a better life, comes to America. The reality of the American dream is a bit harsher, and nothing is as we imagine it to be.
I struggle with the American myth quite a bit. It was important for us to tell a story about characters that come here, and ultimately it doesn't work out for them, and they leave.
In part, it is a story of survival, but it's not just surviving physically, which is an element of the story, but surviving with your principles and your dreams and your beliefs intact.
I came to America from Norway, so very different journey than any of our characters. I came here because I was excited to work here, and I was excited to the freedom that you have here in reinventing yourself. Anything is possible, right? But then, of course, capitalism is brutal.
Communities tend to have a very similar response to their new neighbors as they do the erection of a new structure that's unfamiliar to them.
As a foreign person and a newcomer, I see a community in need. You may rest assured that we will honor the traditions of Doyelstone.
The community usually wants them thrown out and the building torn down. That is the film's kind of central thesis.
There are personal aspects of the immigrant story and Laszlo's journey, being a Hungarian immigrating to America, that speak to me personally, as my mother is a Hungarian immigrant who fled Hungary in 1956. Worked very hard and is a wonderfully respected artist and photographer. I see many parallels of the journey and the struggles of her trying to leave behind a body of work that's meaningful.
He grew up with Hungarian in the house because of his mother, because of his grandparents. It's a very difficult accent. It's an incredibly difficult language. I mean, it's one of the most difficult languages in the world.
Did Peter Piper pick a peck of pickled pepper?
My grandmother spoke 5 or 6 languages. My grandfather and I are very similar, and he had a lot of creative aspirations that were unfulfilled. I often wish that my grandparents were around to have seen some of my work as an actor and see the sacrifices that they have made that have given me the opportunities that I have as an American.
There you are. Man of the hour. What have you done to yourself?
Adrian I didn't know before, but I just sat there every day going, wow, I'm getting my own Adrian Brody show here. This is so impressive, you know, 3 feet in front of me, just delivering Oscar-worthy performance. So, you know, we had many discussions about where power sits between these two gentlemen and what they kind of think of each other, what kind of dance we're doing with each other, and how vulnerable we are with each other at certain times, and, you know, how much we need to protect each other, protect ourselves from each other, etc. With Adrian's character, I felt that survivors had always been portrayed as altruists. And it was so important to me to make sure that this character was not an angel, because the suggestion for me, if the character was an altruist, was that we could only empathize with his trauma if he were perfect. He was a man very much of the mid-century. He is a narcissist, he is a philanderer, he has a wandering eye, but he also loves his family very, very deeply, and the rub of that makes the character multifaceted and very interesting.
There's a son of the beach here to see you.
Laszlo Todd, is that you? I've been looking for you.
There are many interesting layers in Van Buren that Guy exposes and has discovered.
He's also incredibly charming. He has a great turn of phrase.
As persons of unique privilege, I've always thought it's our duty to nurture the defining talents of our epoch. I, of course, am devoid of any such talent. Truth be told, I am incredibly emulous of individuals like him.
And all of the more endearing qualities in him, the more sensitive side of him, are genuine.
It is beautiful, no?
He genuinely recognizes beauty in the world. He genuinely recognizes artistry. And this is why when he comes across Laszlo, and it recognizes how glorious he is, and in fact is envious.
Thank you.
Is quite envious.
He pulls Laszlo out of impoverished conditions, gives him creative breadth in his work and control.
Answer me something. Why architecture?
Is there a better description of a cube than that of its construction?
They both have big egos. They do. You have to have a bit of an ego if you're an artist. You have to have enough of an ego that you're going to say, I'm going to create this massive thing, and I'm going to raise all this money or spend all this money and engage all these people to realize my mad dream.
I trust you. All right?
That's their connection. And that's the seduction as well, which Erzsébet, who does not have the same kind of ego, is not seduced by Van Buren at all. He tells her who he is immediately, and she takes his word for it. He's a bastard. She knows it.
This woman has a profound intuition. I felt from the very first moment that she meets Van Buren, she kind of has his number. She does not like him. She has a sense that this is not a good person.
It says a lot about the need for partnership. Even though her character is physically disabled and Laszlo is somewhat broken, we lift each other up and persevere together.
There was a period of time there where we thought he had made you up. Isn't it fascinating? Meeting the significant others of great artists.
We have seen this relationship portrayed many times before. The brilliant male artist and the doting and at times extremely frustrated wife. And I was so uninterested in seeing that cliché portrayed again, because often I think a relationship between two intellectuals or a great relationship comes from great understanding.
Elizabeth actually gets stronger throughout the second half. Physically, when we meet her, she has osteoporosis caused by the famine, which happened after the war. And so she is very physically weak, but we see her by being in America, by the nutrition that she's having, that she's able to get much, much, much stronger. And you see actually Laszlo getting more and more vulnerable.
Promise you won't let it drive you mad.
He needs Elizabeth's strength in order to survive what he is going through.
It's over. Oh, Mer.
I drew a lot from Mona herself, actually. I felt as though there was a lot of Mona and Brady in Laszlo and Elizabeth. And I think in many ways this film is also, you know, a testament to their love, and they're both artists, and they both understand the struggle of being artists in a highly capitalist society, very similar to Elizabeth and Laszlo, and how to retain your sense of integrity as an artist.
In this film, I had extraordinary partners, actually, that really cared about the film and really put their money where their mouth was. But I've certainly worked on other projects where I felt downright exploited, or I felt that my crew was being exploited, or that my wife was being exploited because we worked together. We wrote the screenplay as a sort of exorcism, a way of channeling a lot of frustration and rage and making something sort of productive out of it. And it worked, you know? I feel more at peace than I did before I made the film. But to get the film off the ground was, of course, no small feat.
Well, Harry, let's start digging.
I've never worked on a gigantic movie, you know, like a $200 million movie. I've probably never even worked on a $100 million movie. But I've worked on probably an $80 million movie. And you always want more money. Like, they never say, like, you've got all the money you want, Judy. Just go ahead, you know, and it's going to be fine. Those limitations can be helpful in that way. And I really believe that, having to decide where we were going to spend the money and where we weren't, and how to make that work and how not to, and where to push for the money and where not to, that all came together.
The construction phase alone will create upwards of 80 local jobs, carpenters, painters. The total area is 2,684 square meters.
Architecture and filmmaking are very similar jobs. It takes about 250 people to construct a building, about 250 people to make a movie. If you are a musician, you can write and record a song in your bedroom these days. And if you're a painter, obviously you can paint a painting. To make a film is quite tricky because a lot of keys have to turn in order to bring that project to life. It requires a level of obsession, which at times borders on the unhealthy.
I think I am playing games with you.
I like extremes. And we tried to make a film that, you know, in and of itself was a brutalist object.
I wanted to work on a movie with Brady Corbet. I had seen his first movie, Childhood of a Leader, and I thought he was amazingly talented. And I asked my agent to get me on one of his movies.
Judy had reached out to me when she heard that I was making a film on brutalism, which was something she's quite passionate about. I mean, I don't know anyone who's done the 1950s better than Judy has, especially on a shoestring budget.
And here it is.
Her work on Carol or David O. Russell's films or Brokeback Mountain for Aang.
Well, I tend to look at the world I'm creating from the character's point of view or from the point of view of the multiple characters. In this case, it was maybe more added pressure because Laszlo's a trained architect, and not only trained, but trained at the Bauhaus, so that is quite a standard to live up to.
I already anticipate the communal rhetoric of anger, but my buildings were devised to endure such erosion.
She's the real Laszlo Toth. I mean, she's really worked so hard with such limited resources to create incredibly beautiful structure based on all of her research of buildings of that era, and Bauhaus-inspired, and use of light.
At dawn, at sunset, at noon.
It's very difficult to present architecture because architecture is inanimate. It's very difficult to make something which is static compelling. We couldn't just present architecture, we had to represent architecture.
A lot of it was done through the way the different pieces of the building were photographed, and the actual institute was played by a lot of different buildings. We went over in the fall of 2022 to pre-scout Hungary, and we walked into this mansion, really the only mansion appropriate and available to shoot in, and it had a glass winter garden, which became the library.
I know, it's terribly dated.
I was like, how are we gonna make this work for a library? And I suddenly got this idea that we would do this forced perspective that would change the shape, so the shelves would be pointing towards the back and would get increasingly deeper. And Brady really liked the idea. And then they all open, you know, at once. There's a scene in the movie where you see that happening. And that was like the flower opening up, you know, like this rebirth.
1, 2, 3.
We discussed early on that we should shoot the film on a camera that was engineered in the 1950s, VistaVision. Many iconic films from the mid-century were shot on it. Vertigo, North by Northwest. The original Parent Trap was shot on VistaVision.
I mean, it leads me into the importance of how does one photograph such scale of both landscape and architecture. We choose to shoot VistaVision. We choose to shoot large format in these Herzogian frames.
The field of view is so immense that you can be physically close to an object, a building, and you can see from the ground all the way to the sky. And so for a film on architecture, that's quite important. Those iconic shots in Vertigo of the Golden Gate Bridge, that's kind of the best use of VistaVision. You can be right there below the bridge, and instead of having to put on a lens that would distort the image, where the image would be bowed and sort of distorted, you have an image that feels sort of impossible.
It is a film about architecture, but in many ways, it's a clever play on words, and the architecture is a catalyst to examine so many other themes that Brady is wanting to explore, you know, about just how humans behave with other humans or treat other humans.
A lot of design and a lot of cinematography, it's not about doing things, it's about letting things be and making those decisions. You can go to a location that is perfect and you don't have to impose yourself on it. You know, making that decision to leave it alone is also shooting, and it's also designing. It's not all about adding. Sometimes it's about not adding. All of those things are part of the arsenal.
For me, you're trying to kind of embrace a naturalism, because I do tend to favor naturalistic lighting over sort of big, bold lighting. We don't use a lot of light where possible. We like to underexpose and be quite bold where we sit our exposures. So I think also that feeds into the minimal maximalist ideas, because my lighting very much is kind of less is more. I was shown this space, which was extraordinary, but essentially it was a catacomb that pre-existed in Budapest and was a wonderful match. Like, this is amazing, how do we not change it? I mean, it was essentially lit by 3 holes in the ceiling that were letting a little bit of natural light through, but not much, and then basically just kind of a daisy chain of practical lights. So I swapped out those bulbs for higher wattage bulbs and threw some lights through the holes, but it was very, very low lighting, and we underexposed and then push processed it in the lab, which is something we tend to do anyway, just for the aesthetic. That was definitely a place where it's like, we love the aesthetic, how on earth do we celebrate what's there? And it is about recognizing when to leave it alone.
What's so important to me, and part of what I think makes the score, you know, like a work of art in and of itself. Like the album is an extraordinary album, and that's because, you know, it wasn't found over the course of like a jam session over a long weekend. It was something that Daniel worked on for years.
We started speaking about it as you were writing the script. When they started pre-production, I went and stayed with Brady, and we were living together during most of the set as well.
Daniel was constantly auditioning, you know, chords and themes, and you know, every once in a while there would be like a really revelatory moment where it was like, that's it, that's it, that's what it is.
I was working on the main theme, and Brady heard me kind of trying to work out where this piano motif could go, like what chord could it go to, starting again, moving to a different chord. And he literally came in the room and was like, that's it. That's like the pianist working it out, like Laszlo is working out his artistic process for making this building. I was working with Axel Dorner, who's an amazing trumpet player in Berlin, who's making construction sounds almost. He has a lot of extended techniques where you'd make quite unique sounds with the instrument.
Daniel went to Carrera and he recorded the reverb in Carrera and then put that saxophone through that reverb so that when it cuts to Carrera, it's sonically accurate. It's what it actually sounds like there. Like if you go like that, you were able to record just the aftermath of that initial clap. All of these things contribute to, you know, something which is just very, I would say, philosophically sound and in step with what the film is trying to communicate.
The first instrument that we thought of was the piano, and particularly prepared piano, where you put screws or objects between the strings. And that's kind of like quite a cartoony link to kind of a film about architecture. John Tilbury, he's one of my favorite musicians. We recorded in his garden shed, so you can hear kind of, at certain points, Kent rain on the roof of the shed during some of the building scenes and like birds tweeting. And then in the intermission, there's kind of him scribbling notes on his score, adjusting his seat. And we wanted that intimacy with the piano.
The intermission was scripted. We got to about page 75. We felt like, okay, now it's time for an intermission. It does something quite extraordinary for an audience because it creates a conversation in the middle of the movie. It's a communal experience, and at a time when we are really trying to figure out how to make people go to the movies again, I think it's important that we eventize the experience.
With Brady, we all pushed collectively to make sure that when we had finished the scene, we came away with something that felt like we'd done something truthful and had integrity in what we were doing. But it was a very easy dynamic between us.
I think all really felt in very safe hands, and he just had a lovely attitude, but you just knew you were being held by somebody with great intellect and real passion and a real understanding of character and mood and as well as the plot.
We're both trying to work with Brady, right? And to give Brady what he wants. And so if you're all on the same page, it just flows, I think. That's how I always feel. It's just naturally harmonious.
There is something so special that goes beyond an ability to communicate with actors and understand the space that is needed. That isn't something that's necessarily gonna materialize when you have a great script and you meet someone who assure you that they're gonna make a great movie. He made a great movie. He surpassed any expectation.
The film, there's nothing on the cutting room floor. It is really the screenplay executed.
Many of the sites of my projects had survived. I expect for them to serve as a political stimulus.